Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Dar's Nights. I know many of you use these videos to relax or fall asleep, so before you drift off, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable and begin. Tonight, I'll whisper you a true horror bedtime tale, soaked in mystery, loss, and the eerie silence of a place time tried to forget. So pull your blanket tight, because this one is about the children who went missing, and the ones who never really left. Deadwater Creek was never supposed to be reopened. Locals called it cursed. Rangers said it was just bad luck. But when kids began vanishing between 1985 and 1995, 13 of them, all gone without a trace, the government shut the trail down, sealed the campgrounds, and left the woods to rot. But what happens when time forgets a horror that never left? When a child finds something he was never meant to see, buried in dirt that still remembers the screams. This isn't just a ghost story. It's a story about guilt, about lost souls, and about how even the dead can be lonely. The house on the edge of the woods stood quiet beneath an overcast sky, its windows clouded with dust, its steps creaking under the weight of years untouched. The realtor had called it a hidden gem, nestled just outside a forgotten Pennsylvania town where the roads narrowed and the trees pressed close, eager to reclaim what was once theirs. It was the kind of house that looked like it had secrets, and yet the price was too good to question. The family, young, hopeful, and exhausted from years of city living, saw it as a chance to start over. Fresh air, quiet nights, space to breathe. They packed what little they had, strapped their lives into the back of a U-Haul, and left the noise behind. The boy was quiet during the drive. He stared out the window, watching trees blur by like they were alive, whispering to each other as the car passed. His parents thought he was just adjusting, but there was something about the road leading to Deadwater that made his small hands curl into fists in his lap. He didn't say much when they pulled up the gravel driveway, didn't smile when his father picked him up to show him the big backyard. His eyes stayed fixed on the tree-line. The dark green wall at the edge of the grass seemed to pulse with a stillness that was anything but calm. He tilted his head, listening. Somewhere, beneath the rustle of leaves and the chirping of unseen birds, he thought he heard laughing. The movers came and went. Boxes filled the rooms, furniture was shoved into place, and the old floorboards groaned with every step. That night, the wind picked up, and the boy lay in bed staring at the ceiling, fingers clenched tight around his blanket. He could still hear it, the laughing, but now it was closer, drifting from beyond his window like a game was being played without him. He slipped out of bed, barefoot on cold wooden floors, and padded toward the sound. Outside, the backyard shimmered under the moon, and the trees at the edge of the property swayed with rhythmless grace. He walked until the grass turned to dirt, and the dirt to moss. The forest opened like a mouth, waiting. He didn't come back with scratches. He didn't even seem scared. He simply appeared in the kitchen the next morning holding something tightly to his chest, a metal box, rusted and scratched, with a clasp that no longer locked. His mother turned, startled, and asked him where he'd found it. He didn't answer. He just placed it on the table and opened the lid. Inside were photographs. Polaroids, faded and curled, edges frayed like they'd been handled too many times. Each one showed children. Some smiling, some mid-laugh, others staring directly into the lens with wide, unblinking eyes. There were over a dozen, all taken in what looked like a summer camp. Trees in the background. Tents. Wooden signs. A lake in one. A rope swing in another. One photo stood out, a group of kids lined up beside a sign that read, "Welcome to Camp Deadwater, Summer 1988. The boy pointed to it silently. His parents exchanged glances. They'd never heard of a camp nearby. The woods were supposed to be protected land, closed off since the 90s. They took the box and told him not to wander into the trees again. He didn't protest. He only looked out the window that night, lips moving softly like he was remembering something told to him in a dream. In the silence of the living room, his mother flipped through the photos again. She noticed something. In the last photo, one taken at night under dim orange light, there were only 12 kids. But behind them, near the trees, stood a shadow. Tall, too tall to be a child. Head slightly tilted. No face visible. Just an outline. Watching. She placed the photo down and told herself it was just a counselor. Probably just an old box someone had buried, forgotten in time. Still, she couldn't shake the unease settling in her stomach. The weight of all those children staring back. The frozen moments of joy that didn't feel joyful. Something about their expressions didn't match the smiles on their faces. It felt like they were posing for someone they didn't trust. That night, the boy slept soundly, but his lips moved as he dreamed. The same names whispered again and again. Names no one in his family recognized. Names not taught in school or heard on the news. The wind picked up, and the trees outside swayed. But no bird sang. And the laughing came again, faint but clear. As if someone was just beyond the window, asking him to come play. 3 days passed, and the box remained untouched on the kitchen counter. Neither parent wanted to admit how often they caught themselves glancing at it. It wasn't the photographs themselves that unsettled them, it was the stillness inside each image. Like time had been paused mid-breath, and behind every captured smile, something waited to exhale. The boy had stopped talking altogether. He wandered the house during the day and stood by the back window at night, hands pressed against the glass, watching the trees sway as if they were calling to him in a language older than speech. He didn't respond to questions. He didn't eat. He didn't cry. He only whispered names in his sleep, names that never repeated. The father finally called the local sheriff's department. A deputy arrived late that afternoon, his uniform faded and his voice quiet. He studied the Polaroids one by one, pausing on the camp sign photo, then on the shadowy figure lurking in the background. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally looked up, his face was pale, his lips tight. He said he'd take the box with him and let the department run some records. Just a routine check. Probably some old hoax. Maybe an abandoned art project. Something weird, but harmless. He took the box, promised to call, and left without another word. But the call never came. That night, the wind returned with greater force, tearing through the branches like something alive was moving inside the forest, something heavy and angry. The boy lay in bed with his eyes wide open, unmoving, unblinking. His mother stood in the doorway and watched him whisper into the dark. She didn't ask who he was talking to. Some part of her already knew the answer. The air in the house had changed. It pressed down with a pressure that filled the lungs but didn't satisfy. The walls felt closer. The rooms quieter. Even the clocks ticked slower, as if time was beginning to forget itself inside these walls. In the early hours of the morning, just before dawn, the family dog began barking at the back door. Sharp, frantic sounds that echoed through the house like warning bells. The father rushed down, flipping lights on as he went, but by the time he reached the door, the barking had stopped. The door stood wide open. No sign of forced entry. No footprints in the dew-covered grass. Only the scent of wet leaves and something older, something sour that clung to the air like rot. The dog was never seen again. The boy didn't react. He sat at the kitchen table the next morning, drawing with a red crayon. When his mother looked closer, her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't drawing shapes or cartoons. He was sketching faces, 12 of them, arranged in a perfect circle. Each face was blank, with hollow black eyes and long mouths curved in identical, lifeless smiles. In the center of the circle stood a tall, faceless shape. A line of red ran from each child's mouth to the figure's chest, like threads tying them all together. The phone rang that afternoon, but it wasn't the deputy. It was the sheriff himself. He spoke carefully, his voice weighted with something he didn't want to say aloud. The box had arrived, but something was wrong. The photographs were gone. In their place, inside the metal container, were dead leaves and bones, small, brittle bones that were being examined by the coroner. No prints on the box. No trace of the photos in any digital or local record. No such camp ever officially registered under the name Deadwater. The only known site by that name had been shut down decades ago after reports of unsafe conditions and repeated disappearances. Unsolved cases. Cold files. All involving children between the ages of 6 and 10. None of the bodies were ever found. The sheriff asked to speak with the boy. The mother handed him the phone, but the boy only listened. He didn't say anything. Not at first. After several moments of silence, he lifted the receiver and whispered one sentence. "They're not lost. They live here now." And then he hung up. That evening, the drawings disappeared from the fridge. Every one of them gone without a trace. The red crayon was still sitting on the table, but it had melted into a twisted, broken line, like it had been crushed under immense pressure. When the parents checked the boy's room, they found him asleep, curled in bed, breathing softly. But on the wall above his head, drawn in faint red strokes, were the same faces again. 12, exactly. All smiling. All staring forward. The tall figure in the center was no longer faceless. It had eyes now. And they were open. Outside, the wind howled louder than ever. But underneath it all, if one listened closely, was a different sound entirely. Children laughing. By the end of the first week, the house no longer felt like theirs. It wasn't just the silence, or the shadows that lingered too long in corners. It was the sensation that something else was listening. Watching. Learning them. The walls felt damp with memory, not moisture. The kind that clung to your skin and refused to wash off. The boy had stopped acknowledging his parents completely. He didn't cry, didn't ask questions, didn't even respond when his name was called. He spent long hours near the back window, his eyes fixed on the tree line. Sometimes he would hum, a tune no one recognized, but one that made the hairs on their arms rise without warning. Like a lullaby from somewhere ancient. Something meant to soothe something that should never have been disturbed. The father boarded up the back door, hammered nails into the frame and told himself it was just to keep the animals out. But each morning, no matter how many nails were driven into the wood, the door would swing open again. Quietly. Gently. As if inviting something in. The dog's collar was found 2 days later, laid carefully on the back porch, cleaned of blood or dirt, the tag polished to a shine. No footprints. No drag marks. Just the collar, waiting, as if someone wanted it returned. As if someone was showing they could come and go as they pleased. The boy began to sleepwalk. Each night, his parents would find him standing somewhere different in the house, once in the basement, once at the top of the stairs, once pressed up against the attic door with one hand resting flat against the wood. When they asked him what he was doing, he only whispered a single word, listening. But it wasn't his voice. It was thinner. Echoed. Like it had passed through too many mouths before reaching his own. The sheriff didn't call back. When the father drove into town, the small police station was locked and dark. The lights were off. The sign out front had been removed. No one in town could say when it had happened. One woman at the diner swore it had been gone for years. Another claimed the sheriff had passed away back in '99. But the father had spoken to him just days ago. He remembered the voice. The hesitation. The fear. But no record of the call existed on his phone. That night, the television turned on by itself. Static at first, then a flickering image, grainy footage of children playing in the woods. The screen pulsed with unnatural light. Trees bending overhead. Laughter carried through the distortion. Then a cut. Faces close to the lens. Eyes wide and wrong. Movements that didn't match the frames. Then darkness. The boy was already sitting in front of the screen when his parents arrived. His mouth stretched into a smile that didn't touch his eyes. The mother began keeping a journal. Not out of curiosity, but necessity. She no longer trusted her own memory. Days were beginning to repeat. She'd make breakfast and find the same eggs already cooked. She'd go to bed and wake up in the hallway, the sheets still tucked in place on the bed. She wrote down everything. Dates, times, weather. She counted the birds outside the window, only to find their numbers never changed. 3 black crows. Always 3. Always on the same branch, looking inward. She flipped through the old Polaroids again, now printed from her mind in perfect detail. She could see things she hadn't before. In each picture, the backgrounds had begun to warp. Trees twisted at impossible angles. Shadows that didn't belong. In one image, a child's foot was slightly blurred, as if mid-step, but the rest of the body remained perfectly still. In another, a reflection appeared in the lake where no one was standing. Tall and still. Watching. When she blinked, the reflection seemed to move closer. They tried to leave. Packed bags, loaded the car, buckled the boy in. The engine turned, the tires rolled, but the road stretched too long. The trees never ended. Hours passed. No towns. No signs. No cell signal. When they turned around, they found themselves back in the driveway. Exactly where they started. The bags were back inside the house. The boy was already standing on the porch, staring at them with his head tilted just slightly to the side. He raised one hand and waved once, slowly. The father opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. That night, the clock struck 3:17 a.m. and the front door opened without a sound. The hallway filled with cold air that tasted like wet earth and ash. The boy sat up in bed and said their names again, 12 of them. Clear. Deliberate. The room grew darker than the absence of light. And beneath the floorboards, faintly, something began to move. The days became indistinguishable. Time folded in on itself, moments bleeding into one another like ink in water. They stopped keeping track of hours because clocks spun without hands, and sunlight lost its rhythm. The forest had taken hold not just of their surroundings, but of their sense of reality. Sounds no longer obeyed direction. A knock on the front wall would echo from behind them. The chirp of a bird came from under the floorboards. It wasn't confusion. It was reorientation, like something was slowly rebuilding their perception. The boy no longer ate. Plates of food sat untouched, but he never grew thinner. He sat for hours in the same chair, not blinking, barely breathing. Sometimes his lips moved, mouthing words too quiet to hear. The mother recorded him once and slowed down the audio. Beneath the hiss of the old cassette tape, a whisper repeated itself, "They're not lost. Just forgotten." The voice layered over itself, aged and young, high and low, as though all the missing children were speaking through him at once. The father tried burning the photo album. The flames refused to catch. The edges would curl, but the pages remained intact. Even soaking it in gasoline only made the fire flicker briefly before it died out. He buried it deep in the woods, over an hour's walk into the trees. But the next morning, it was back on the coffee table, untouched, with a new photo added. This one was recent. The boy was in it. But so were 5 other children, their faces eerily blank, standing just beyond the tree line. Their bodies half faded, as if caught between moments. The photo wasn't taken by anyone in the house. The house groaned with memories that weren't theirs. Doors creaked open into rooms they didn't remember building. Hallways stretched too long. The attic door creaked open by itself and revealed stairs that had never been there before. A staircase descending instead of rising, swallowing light as it turned inward. They never went down it. But every morning, it grew longer, darker, colder. As if waiting for the right moment. As if it was growing, inch by inch, with every fearful breath the family took. Footprints appeared in the yard. Small, bare feet. Always coming from the forest. Always stopping just outside the windows. The prints never led back. Just toward the house. As if the visitors had entered and never left. The wind carried whispers at night, impossible to interpret, but filled with emotion, longing, sadness, sometimes laughter. Not cruel, but not comforting either. Like echoes from children who no longer understood what it meant to be alive. The phone rang once, only once. When they answered, it was a faint buzzing at first. Then a voice, fragile and broken, calling the mother's name. Not her first name. Not the one she used now. But the one she used as a child, back when she lived just a few towns away. The name her brother used to call her before he vanished in 1987. Before his face appeared on flyers, then on a cold caseboard. Before she buried the guilt of sneaking out that night and never telling anyone what she saw. The past began to resurface. Not as memory, but as presence. Old letters the mother had written as a teenager appeared in drawers she hadn't opened in years. A bicycle bell just like her brother's lay on the porch, rusted in the exact way she remembered. The boy began drawing pictures, stick figures at first, then more detailed. All of them of her childhood home. Details he could never have known. The fence post with the split nail. The crooked mailbox. The broken swing hanging from the tree. Always with the same caption, "Where the others wait." The realization came not all at once, but slowly, like a storm rising on the horizon. This wasn't about a new haunting. It was about unfinished business. The ghosts were not tormenting them. They were returning for something left behind. The boy, born near the edge of that forest, was a beacon, someone untouched by disbelief. Someone who hadn't yet unlearned the language of silence. He didn't fear the whispers. He understood them. He welcomed them. The parents tried to intervene. Holy water, salt, crosses, none of it worked. They weren't dealing with something demonic. They were dealing with a memory too strong to die. The kind that soaked into the roots and rocks, that lived in the breath of the soil. Deadwater Creek wasn't cursed. It was grieving. The land didn't hunger for flesh, it mourned for innocence. It reached for those who remembered, and reclaimed those who forgot. The boy began building a small structure in the backyard using stones, sticks, and bones of small animals. A shape that looked like a doorway. A threshold. At night, he would sit beside it, humming that same old tune, as the trees whispered in time with his voice. The father knocked it down twice. Each time, it rebuilt itself by dawn. Stronger. More complete. As if the boy wasn't working alone anymore. They stopped sleeping. They stopped arguing. They stopped hoping it would end. Because endings require closure. And Deadwater Creek had never received any. It had waited decades for someone to come back and acknowledge the silence. Now, that someone had returned, and the forest wasn't going to let him leave. The air around the house changed. It grew thick, like a lung filling slowly with water. Breathing became an effort, a conscious act rather than a reflex. Every breath tasted of damp leaves, decayed wood, and the sweetness of rot. The smell wasn't in the house. It was in them, under the skin, clinging to the hair, bleeding into their clothes. It became impossible to distinguish the forest from the home. One was swallowing the other, and the difference no longer mattered. The boy no longer responded to his name. He reacted only to distant sounds. A twig snapping miles away. A wind chime no longer hanging on their porch. The hush of something vast moving beneath the forest floor. He began waking up with dirt under his fingernails, scratches on his legs, pine needles in his sheets. Locks were placed on doors and windows, but they clicked open at night without a sound. Not broken, not forced, just opened, as if obeying an invisible command. The mother started seeing things at the edge of her vision. Glimpses of shapes darting between trees. Not human, not animal. Children-shaped, but wrong in how they moved, too slow and too fast at the same time. Limbs bending too far, heads tilted at angles that suggested listening. Always watching from a distance. Never approaching. Yet somehow always getting closer. They weren't stalking. They were waiting. And waiting, the mother realized, was worse than chasing. The father dug into local history. Town records, police files, forgotten microfilms. He found the name of the old summer camp once nestled within the woods, Camp Hollow Pines. It had shut down quietly in the early 90s, long before lawsuits or media investigations. No headlines. No outrage. Just silence, as if the whole town had agreed to forget. A counselor had gone missing. A few kids had vanished. The story ended there. But the truth had festered beneath the surface. A notebook survived. It belonged to the missing counselor, a young man barely out of high school. The entries started normal, descriptions of camp life, games, and weather. Then, toward the end, the handwriting changed. Sloppier, uneven, paranoid. He wrote about hearing crying in the woods at night. He wrote about kids who shouldn't have been there. Children with no assigned cabins. Children who never answered roll call. He stopped naming them, simply calling them the returners. On the final page, a single sentence repeated 12 times, "I didn't let them die, but I didn't save them either." The father traced the land deeds. The property had changed hands a dozen times. Each new owner stayed for no longer than a year. Sudden sales. Abandonment. One simply vanished, their car found a mile into the woods, doors open, headlights still on. Local legend dismissed it as fearmongering. Outsiders weren't welcome to stir old wounds. The town had buried the past in more ways than one. The boys' drawings grew more elaborate. Less like a child's sketches and more like architectural plans. Floor layouts of places they didn't recognize. Bunk beds in rows. An old mess hall. A pier over a dried lake. He labeled them in red crayon, names the parents didn't recognize at first. But the mother began matching them to names on old missing posters. One by one. 11 children. One for each year the camp ran. The 12th drawing was blank, except for a shape, a silhouette of a person seated in a circle of stones. The boy wouldn't explain it. He only placed it beside the photo album, which now had 2 new pictures. Both parents. Their eyes scratched out with tiny XS. The boy's photo, in contrast, had changed. He was smiling now. Surrounded by children no one had ever seen, but who looked familiar. As if they'd once been in the background of forgotten family outings. Unnoticed. Present. One night, the mother woke up to find the front door open. The boy stood outside barefoot, staring into the woods. She called to him, but he didn't move. Only turned slightly, just enough to glance over his shoulder. His face was blank, not frightened, not curious. Just calm. As if he finally understood something the rest of them hadn't. As if he was already somewhere else. From that night on, the boy spoke in his sleep. Full conversations. Different voices. Some old, some childlike. Sometimes he laughed. Other times he cried. But always, he ended with the same words, whispered like a lullaby, "It's okay." He said the water won't hurt us now. And the water did come, slowly at first, seeping into the basement. Then rising, even though it hadn't rained in weeks. It pooled in the corners, dripped from the ceilings, warped the wooden frames. It carried the smell of the creek. It carried whispers. And in the ripples, the parents swore they saw faces, blurred, stretched, distorted, but undeniably watching. There was no more pretending. Deadwater Creek had reached them. Not with violence, but with memory. With history. It didn't scream. It didn't rage. It simply persisted. The past had been ignored for too long, and now it refused to be quiet any longer. The silence in the house stopped being empty. It became populated with layers of noise buried beneath quiet, wet footsteps on wooden floors, faint giggling muffled by walls, and whispers too low to make sense yet unmistakably real. The sounds never came during storms or daylight, only in the dry, dead hours of the night when the world itself seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't just haunting anymore. It was integration. The house was becoming part of something ancient and unresolved. The mirrors began to reflect what wasn't in the room. The mother avoided them first, catching glimpses of shadows that didn't belong to her. Faces appeared behind her shoulder and disappeared when she turned. Sometimes, they lingered for a moment too long. The boy stood in front of one mirror for nearly an hour, watching something no one else could see. When the mother pulled him away, the glass stayed fogged for hours, though the house was cold and dry. The boy's drawings shifted again. They stopped depicting cabins and maps. Instead, they became portraits, faces of children drawn in perfect detail. He added notes next to each image. Names. Ages. Favorite games. One had a birthday marked. Another had the words, "Doesn't like loud noises," underlined. These were no longer sketches from imagination. These were remembrances. The boy wasn't drawing strangers anymore. He was documenting friends. At school, the boy withdrew completely. Teachers reported him staring out the window for hours, lips moving silently. When questioned, he never remembered doing it. His classmates said they didn't like sitting near him anymore. One said he smelled like the forest. Another swore she saw a girl sitting next to him during lunch, even though there was no one there. The girl had long, wet hair and blue lips. Back at home, the father grew obsessed with the land. He started mapping every tree line, every dip in the terrain, comparing satellite images from decades ago with current ones. Deadwater Creek had receded over the years, but he noticed something disturbing. The forest had moved, not just grown, but shifted subtly. Trails vanished from old maps. Structures were missing. Camp Hollow Pines had existed, but now even its ruins were gone. Nature had erased what justice never addressed. He returned to the counselor's notebook again, flipping through the last pages with increasing urgency. One note stood out more than the rest: "I buried the album under the devil's finger tree. They'll come for it if they know it's been touched." That line burned itself into his mind. The family hadn't just found the album. They had activated it. The ghosts weren't simply haunting. They were inviting. They had been waiting for someone to remember. The mother noticed the boy talking in his sleep again, but this time, he wasn't whispering to invisible friends. He was asking for permission. Repeating the same phrase, "Can I stay this time?" over and over, voice trembling with anticipation, not fear. The tone was almost hopeful. As if he longed for something on the other side of waking. The parents stopped sleeping. The lights stayed on in every room, but they didn't help. The brightness only cast deeper shadows, each one holding movement just out of sight. A radio left on for background noise began tuning itself to dead channels. Amid the static, voices emerged, fragmented, childlike, desperate. "Don't forget us. We're still here. Play with us." Sometimes, the voice was their son's, though he slept soundly in another room. The water in the house deepened. No source could be found, yet it soaked the carpets, bloomed mold on walls, and crept up furniture legs. It brought smells with it: dank soil, rust, algae. The scent of still water that hadn't seen the sun in decades. The basement turned into a shallow pool, and in the reflection of the water, they saw images that weren't their own. Campfires. Tents. Children running. Screams muffled by laughter. The family stopped speaking openly. Each of them internalized the dread differently. The mother became frantic and spiritual, placing crosses and charms throughout the house, though none of them held any effect. The father fell into deep silence, calculating, researching, red-eyed at his desk for hours. And the boy? He only grew more peaceful. As if the more he disconnected from the waking world, the closer he came to something welcoming him with open arms. The photo album gained a new picture. This one showed their backyard, but overgrown, wild, completely consumed by the forest. In the photo, a dozen children stood hand in hand. The boy stood in the center, smiling. Their son hadn't posed for that photo. It hadn't been taken. It had been delivered. A message. An invitation. A warning. Outside, the trees pressed closer each night. Branches leaned against the windows. Roots broke through the foundation. The backyard became darker, even during daylight. Birds stopped singing. No animal tracks were ever found, and yet movement echoed constantly among the trees. Not hunting. Just circling. Watching. Waiting. Deadwater Creek wasn't cursed in the traditional sense. It didn't harm indiscriminately. It chose. It called to those who listened. And once it touched you, it didn't let go. It seeped in through the cracks of memory, wound its way into your dreams, and rewrote what you believed was real. The family had opened the door, unknowingly, but willingly. And now, something ancient and forgotten was coming through. The fog that clung to the woods no longer waited for morning to vanish. It began drifting into the yard as early as dusk, curling around the house like fingers, lingering at the windows, pressing against the glass as though trying to see inside. The family noticed the air grew heavier at night, damp with an earthy coldness that didn't match the season. Even heaters failed to keep the rooms warm. The chill wasn't just physical, it carried something else with it. Something watchful. The boy's voice began to change, but not in the way most children's voices do with age. There was a distant echo to it now, as if his words traveled a long way before reaching the room. He spoke less frequently and rarely responded to his name immediately. His eyes stayed dilated even in bright rooms, and when he did blink, it seemed reluctant, like something inside him didn't want to miss a moment of what it was seeing through him. His drawings multiplied overnight, appearing in piles on the floor with details he couldn't possibly remember. Images of the camp before its closure, the counselor's cabin with blood-smeared doors, a group of children standing beneath a tree carved with initials. He never remembered making them. When questioned, he simply smiled and said, "They wanted me to show you." It became clear that he was no longer creating, he was transmitting. The father took to locking every door and window, but found them unlatched the next morning without signs of forced entry. He set up motion-activated cameras around the property. Most captured nothing but swaying trees and drifting fog. One, however, recorded a single frame that made him stop breathing, a figure in the distance, thin, adult, and hunched over. The head hung too low, the limbs elongated beyond proportion. And standing beside it was a small child holding hands with the creature. The child wore the boy's favorite hoodie. He deleted the footage without telling anyone. Some truths were too dangerous to share, even with those you love. The mother grew paranoid of reflective surfaces. Mirrors, windows, even puddles, she believed something was watching her through them. She taped over them all, but still felt its gaze. One morning, she discovered her wedding ring submerged in the toilet bowl. It hadn't slipped off. It had been placed there. Perfectly centered, gleaming. She hadn't touched that bathroom in hours. The boy's bedroom filled with whispers audible even through closed doors. Not every night, only on the ones when the forest pressed especially close. The whispers never escalated into screams, but they were persistent, patient, childlike. They called him by different names. One night, the parents heard him whisper back, "I'm almost ready." He stopped eating normally. Food lost its flavor to him. Instead, he began consuming small handfuls of dirt from the flower beds outside. He said it tasted familiar. When the parents tried to intervene, he cried, not in pain or fear, but like someone being torn from a home they had just returned to. That same night, muddy footprints led from the garden to his bedroom, too small for an adult, too wide for one child alone. In the attic, the father discovered something buried beneath insulation and boxes, a stack of newspaper clippings, yellowed and curling at the edges. Articles about the disappearances between 1985 and 1995. Each article had been underlined in red pen, with cryptic notes in the margins, "Found them." He was sorry. Still waiting. At the bottom of one article was a single name scrawled in uneven handwriting, "Their sons." The photo album continued to add images no one had taken. One showed the family sitting at dinner, each of them pale and expressionless, though none remembered such a moment. In another, the boy stood in the forest surrounded by at least 20 children, none of whom existed in any official record. They weren't smiling. They looked resolved. As if they had already said their goodbyes. The trees began creaking even when no wind blew. Their groans sounded like words, muffled and drawn out, like warnings in a language the human mind struggled to interpret. One night, the mother stood on the porch and whispered, "What do you want?" The wind didn't respond, but the front door slowly closed behind her. When she turned back, the forest felt closer than it had seconds before. In the mornings, the boy's bed sometimes appeared empty, but he would be found crouched in corners, eyes open, whispering answers to questions only he could hear. His hands were often cold and damp, like they had been holding something submerged for hours. He always said the same thing when they asked what he was doing, "I'm remembering." It became undeniable. The house wasn't simply haunted. It was being reclaimed. The ghosts weren't visitors, they were residents long forgotten, and the family had trespassed. The boy wasn't being possessed or tormented. He was being adopted. Welcomed. Molded into someone who could bridge the gap between the living and the waiting. The album was never meant to be found. It was meant to be received. The parents finally understood. Deadwater Creek wasn't cursed because of what happened. It was cursed because it was never acknowledged. The victims hadn't cried out for justice. They cried out for companionship. They wanted someone who remembered them. Someone who wouldn't leave. Someone who would stay. And now, the boy was becoming that someone. The change was no longer subtle. The boy's presence seemed to affect everything around him. Clocks stopped working in any room he stayed in for more than an hour. Batteries drained without reason. Lights flickered even when no storm passed through, and always, at the same time, 3:19 a.m. The family began waking in cold sweat at exactly that moment, each one unsure why they were awake, only knowing they felt watched. The boy, however, never seemed to sleep at all. His voice lost its pitch. Not deeper, not higher, just hollow. When he spoke, it sounded like his words traveled through a tunnel of memory, as if repeating someone else's thoughts. He spoke about places they'd never visited, about games that hadn't been played in decades, and names that matched none of the missing kids but somehow carried the same weight. He talked about the tree that we don't climb and the room without light and the one who stayed. These weren't fantasies. They were recollections. Each day, his behavior strayed further from the boy they had raised. He no longer responded to comfort. Hugs left him indifferent. Praise left him silent. But he was never angry. Never rebellious. He simply acted like someone else. He stood still for too long, stared too deeply, blinked too little. Even his shadow seemed to lag behind by a second, as if unsure whether it still belonged to him. One afternoon, the mother found her son in the hallway, standing with his hand pressed against the wall, whispering. The wallpaper peeled where his palm touched, revealing faint symbols etched into the wood beneath, symbols older than any language she knew, but ones that made her bones ache just to look at. She painted over them in a panic. By morning, they were visible again, clearer than before. Footsteps started echoing through the house during the day, soft and rhythmic, like the pacing of barefoot children. Doors creaked open without cause, and the smell of campfire smoke would occasionally drift through closed windows. It smelled aged, like ash from a fire that burned decades ago and never truly died. The boy would pause when the scent arrived, inhale deeply, and smile faintly as though remembering a good summer long ago. He would then return to whatever he was doing, as if nothing had changed. Neighbors stopped visiting. Even mail delivery grew inconsistent. Animals avoided the property, birds flew wide arcs around the roof, and deer no longer wandered through the backyard. Once, a dog from the next street over ran into the yard and began barking furiously toward the house, teeth bared, hackles raised. Within seconds, the barking ceased. The dog wasn't seen again. The owners never asked. The photo album continued to change, even though it had been hidden in a locked cabinet. It now included pictures no one could have taken, views from inside closets, images from under the bed, angles too low to be adult and too deliberate to be accidental. One image showed the parents asleep while the boy stood over them, staring. The timestamp read 3:19 a.m. That same night, the father dreamt of the camp. Not as ruins, but as it had been, alive, crowded with children laughing, counselors guiding group activities, and something standing just beyond the tree line. He woke up gasping, mud smeared across his sheets, twigs tangled in his hair. He hadn't left the room. Or so he thought. The mother became obsessed with finding records, anything from the original investigation. She visited the county library, the police station, even contacted retired officers. All roads led to silence. Files were either missing, marked as classified, or mysteriously damaged. The only consistent name across all surviving reports was the camp counselor, Thomas E. Raines. No address. No arrest. No obituary. Just a note, last seen near Deadwater Creek. Presumed drowned. Body never recovered. The boy drew Raines the next day. Without being told. Without knowing the name. The drawing was of a man with eyes scratched out and a smile carved into his cheeks. Around him stood children, holding his hands, their expressions vacant but calm. The drawing was captioned in a childish scrawl, "We're not scared anymore." Strange marks appeared on the walls, small handprints in charcoal black, too high for the boy to have reached and too low for the adults. They weren't smudged. They were pressed, deliberately placed like symbols in a language only the forest understood. Scrubbing them off only made them darker the next day. The dreams worsened. The parents began hearing children laughing under the floorboards, a sound joyful yet detached from reality. It didn't fade with daylight. It lingered, like an echo stuck in the wood. The basement door would be found ajar each morning, despite the padlock they'd added. And always, behind that door, came the sound of pages flipping, as if someone was still updating the album. The father once tried to leave with the boy in the car. Less than 2 miles from the house, the vehicle stopped, every light blinking red, engine stalling as if submerged in water. The boy turned to him, calm, and said, "You can't take me from them. I'm not yours anymore." The album was never an artifact. It was a contract. A beacon. A reminder. The children who were lost hadn't vanished. They had chosen a different kind of permanence. A childhood unending, wrapped in the haunted arms of a place that remembered them. And now, it remembered one more. The boy's eyes began to reflect the forest itself, dark and shifting, flecked with hints of green and brown, as if the trees had grown within him. When he looked at the family, it was no longer with recognition, but with the patience of something ancient waiting to be understood. His laughter became rare and hollow, like the echo of leaves brushing dry earth. His footsteps grew softer, and sometimes he moved without casting a shadow. The house around them seemed to bend subtly, as if the walls were breathing, expanding and contracting in time with the boy's strange rhythms. Hallways lengthened overnight, doors that had once led to closets now opened onto darkness that seemed to stretch beyond the physical limits of the house. At times, the ceilings warped and sagged, distorting perspectives, turning familiar rooms into unfamiliar labyrinths. The family's reflections became distorted in mirrors, replaced with fleeting images of children playing in sunlit clearings, or standing silently just beyond the edge of the frame. They noticed their own faces sometimes vanished completely, leaving only the background. The boy was unaffected by this, his reflection remained clear, but his expression was unreadable. At night, the whispers multiplied. The voices of children speaking in soft, overlapping tones filled every corner of the house, chanting names, singing old camp songs long forgotten by adults. The boy joined them, speaking words in languages no one understood, words that seemed older than time itself. Objects moved on their own. Toys shifted position, chairs tilted, and doors opened slowly and closed with a faint sigh. The family's pets refused to enter certain rooms, even insects avoided the boy's bedroom. Plants near the house wilted inexplicably, while moss crept over stone steps and fences, as if the forest itself was reclaiming the land. One day, the mother found a bundle of letters hidden beneath the floorboards in the boy's room. They were addressed to the missing children, written in an old-fashioned script. The letters spoke of forgiveness, of waiting for someone to understand, and of a promise never to be forgotten. One letter, addressed simply, "To the one who will carry us," was signed with a single initial, T. The boy's condition worsened. He stopped speaking altogether, communicating only through the album and the drawings he left scattered throughout the house. These sketches were more vivid, showing scenes of children holding hands in a circle, faces serene and glowing with an unearthly light. In one drawing, the boy himself was depicted standing at the center of the circle, surrounded by ghostly figures reaching out to him. Sleep became impossible for the parents. They lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, footsteps pacing the halls, the soft murmur of voices, and the occasional distant cry that chilled them to the bone. The boy, however, seemed at peace, as if he belonged to another world now, one that intersected with their own in shadows and half-remembered dreams. The local authorities, once dismissive of the family's concerns, began to take notice after neighbors reported strange lights flickering in the windows and heard children's laughter echoing through the trees at night. Investigators who attempted to enter the property found themselves overcome with a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, forcing them to retreat without explanation. The parents tried to reach out for help beyond the physical world, consulting spiritual advisors, psychics, and historians. Each came away shaken, recounting tales of restless souls bound by guilt and sorrow, trapped in places where memory refuses to die. They warned the family that the boy was becoming a vessel, a bridge between the living and the dead, and that crossing back would become harder with every passing day. As days turned into weeks, the boy's presence grew more ethereal. His voice, when it returned, was layered with others, a chorus of the missing children speaking through him in unison. He spoke of an ancient pact, sealed in the soil beneath the creek, binding the children's spirits to the forest until someone could bear their burden. The parents realized that the boy was not just a child anymore, he was a keeper of their secrets, a guardian of their memories. He was becoming part of the forest itself, rooted and eternal. And with that realization came a heartbreaking truth: to save him, they might have to lose him forever. The air around the house grew heavier, as if the forest's breath had seeped inside, thickening the atmosphere with a weight no one could escape. Windows fogged without cause, and a chill clung to the skin even when the sun was high. The boy's eyes, still deep pools of shifting shadows, seemed to pull the very essence of the place into him, drawing the darkness closer. The album's photographs multiplied again, but now, the images were no longer still. Faces flickered in the glossy paper, smiles twisting into grimaces, eyes widening in silent screams. At times, the photos would show the boy standing in the forest, surrounded by the missing children, their hands outstretched, beckoning. The family tried to close the album, to lock it away, but it always returned to the table, open and waiting. Whispers filled the night, louder and more insistent. The voices of the children wove through the rooms like a cold wind, begging, pleading for acknowledgement. The boy responded with soft murmurs, answering in the same voices, sometimes all at once, a chorus rising and falling in eerie harmony. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by dreams that bled into waking hours, a seamless twilight where reality was uncertain. The parents watched helplessly as their son slipped further from their world. His skin grew pale, almost translucent, veins tracing delicate patterns beneath like roots spreading through earth. His body felt light, as if the forest spirit had begun to replace his flesh and bone. When he touched the walls, small leaves and twigs appeared, sprouting and curling with unnatural speed. Attempts to leave the house ended in confusion and fear. Roads that once led out twisted endlessly, looping back toward the creek. GPS devices malfunctioned, phones lost signal, and compasses spun without direction. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed the world beyond, isolating the family within its ever-growing shadow. One evening, the father found himself drawn to the creek, compelled by a force beyond reason. The water was still and black, reflecting a sky that never changed, trapped in perpetual twilight. Beneath the surface, indistinct shapes moved slowly, ghostly figures drifting just out of reach. He heard laughter carried on the breeze, soft and childlike, calling his name. The mother discovered an old journal buried beneath the floorboards in the boy's room, its pages yellowed and fragile. It belonged to the camp counselor, Thomas E. Raines. The entries detailed an obsession with the children, a desire to protect them from a darkness he believed lurked in the woods. but as the entries progressed, his tone twisted. He spoke of voices in the trees, of shadows moving with intent, and of a pact made to keep the children safe by binding their souls to the forest. The final entry was a frantic scrawl: "The creek demands its price. The children cannot leave. Neither can I. They are waiting. They are hungry. And soon, someone new will join us." The family's reality fractured further. The boy no longer spoke to them but to the forest. He wandered the house at all hours, sometimes disappearing for minutes, sometimes for hours. When he returned, his eyes glowed faintly, and he carried tokens, stones carved with symbols, feathers black as night, strands of hair that weren't his. The line between past and present blurred. The missing children's laughter echoed not only in the house but in their dreams, in the rustling of leaves outside, in the creak of old floorboards. The family understood that they had become part of a story written long ago, one that refused to end. They tried everything: counseling, rituals, leaving messages for help, but the forest's hold was relentless. The boy's fate intertwined with the spirits of Deadwater Creek, tethered by a sorrow older than memory. The family's only hope lay in uncovering the truth buried beneath years of silence and shadow, in finding a way to break the pact before it consumed them all. But some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. Some spirits, once called, cannot be sent back. And some children, once lost to the forest, never truly leave. The boy's connection to the forest deepened. His skin, pale and translucent, began to take on the texture of bark, rough and uneven in patches, as if the very trees had grown into him. His hair rustled softly even when there was no breeze, like leaves whispering secrets. His eyes glimmered with an unnatural light, shifting between shades of green and deep brown, mirroring the canopy above. The house itself responded to this transformation. Walls pulsed subtly, as though breathing with life. Floors creaked with a new kind of sound, a slow, rhythmic thudding that echoed the heartbeat of the earth beneath. Windows no longer simply reflected the outside world. They showed fleeting images of children running through the woods, shadows darting just beyond the glass, faces pale and smiling with a sadness that was both inviting and terrifying. The family's efforts to reach out for help met with strange obstacles. Phone calls dropped abruptly, emails bounced back unread, and visitors refused to come near the property. Friends and neighbors began to avoid the family, whispers of the haunted house spreading quietly through the town. The boy's presence had become something people felt rather than saw, an invisible weight pressing down on anyone who ventured too close. At night, the voices grew stronger. The chorus of children's whispers transformed into full songs, old campfire tunes twisted into mournful hymns. The boy sang along, his voice layered with echoes, sometimes sounding like many children singing at once, sometimes like a single voice lost in a vast, empty forest. Objects around the house shifted mysteriously. Photographs changed, showing the boy in the company of the missing children, their faces illuminated with an otherworldly glow. Toys moved on their own, rearranged in patterns that resembled ancient symbols. Leaves and twigs appeared inside the rooms, growing rapidly into small plants that withered and died by morning. The boy's drawings became more detailed and haunting. He sketched the creek, the dense forest, and the faces of children, their eyes hollow but pleading. One drawing showed the boy standing alone on the banks of the creek, surrounded by a circle of spectral figures reaching out to him with transparent hands. Another depicted a dark figure lurking behind trees, a shadow with no face, watching, waiting. The parents noticed the boy's gradual detachment from the physical world. He no longer responded to their calls or touches, his mind seemingly occupied by voices only he could hear. His movements became fluid and slow, like a dancer caught in an invisible current. Sometimes, he would disappear for hours, only to return with dirt under his nails and leaves tangled in his hair. In their desperation, the parents sought out an old local historian who specialized in the town's dark past. He spoke of the camp counselor, Thomas Raines, whose obsession had driven him to madness. Raines believed the forest was alive, that it demanded sacrifice to keep its secrets. The missing children, he said, were not victims but prisoners, caught in a cycle of guilt and sorrow that tethered their souls to Deadwater Creek. The historian warned the family that the forest's power was ancient, older than the town itself. It was bound to the land by blood and memory, and breaking free would require more than just understanding, it would demand sacrifice and courage. The boy, he said, was becoming the forest's chosen guardian, the link between past and present, living and dead. The family's hope rested on unraveling the mystery, on discovering the truth hidden beneath years of silence. They pored over old records, pieced together faded newspaper clippings, and visited forgotten graves. Each revelation brought them closer to the dark heart of the forest, but also deeper into its grasp. The boy's transformation accelerated. His skin grew tougher, bark-like ridges spreading over his arms and legs. His eyes glowed softly in the dark, a beacon for the lost. His voice, when it emerged, carried the weight of centuries, soft, yet filled with an urgency that pierced the silence. The family realized the inevitable. The boy was not simply lost, he was becoming part of the forest, a guardian bound by an ancient pact. Their fight was no longer just to save him but to save themselves, from the haunting legacy of Deadwater Creek, from the shadows that fed on guilt and grief, and from the children who sought not vengeance but a companion in their eternal solitude. The creek's waters ran cold and dark, reflecting the sorrow buried beneath its surface. The forest waited patiently, its secrets alive in every rustling leaf and whispered name. The missing children of Deadwater Creek were not gone, they were waiting. The forest's grip tightened around the boy. His features blurred between human and something older, something born from the soil and shadow. The bark on his skin deepened, dark veins resembling root systems snaking beneath the surface, pulsing with an unseen life force. His breath came slow and steady, matching the rhythm of the creek that wound through the woods, timeless, eternal, and ominous. The photographs in the album no longer captured moments frozen in time, instead, they acted as gateways. Faces in the images moved, eyes shifting to follow anyone who dared to look. Whispers seeped from the pages, soft and beckoning, carrying secrets the living were never meant to hear. The boy's touch on the photos caused the faces to glow faintly, shimmering like spirits caught between worlds. Each night, the boundary between reality and nightmare grew thinner. The boy's voice echoed through the house, not in words, but in songs and laughter that sounded both joyful and mournful. It was a language of the forest, spoken in the rustle of leaves, the creak of branches, and the distant calls of unseen creatures. The family could feel it crawling under their skin, weaving through their thoughts, an unrelenting presence. Outside, the forest seemed to move. Trees shifted imperceptibly when no one watched, paths that led to familiar places twisted into new, unrecognizable routes. The creek's waters glowed faintly beneath the moonlight, swirling with unnatural colors that mirrored the boy's eyes. At times, silhouettes appeared on the water's surface, shadowy children drifting slowly, their forms half submerged, reaching out toward the shore. The family's attempts to intervene became desperate. They tried burning the photo album, but the flame sputtered and died before consuming a single page. They attempted rituals to cleanse the house, sprinkling salt and sage, but the forest's presence resisted, swallowing the smoke and scattering the salt like dust in the wind. Each effort only seemed to deepen the boy's bond with the unseen world. The boy wandered more often, stepping into the forest for hours without explanation. When he returned, his eyes held stories the family couldn't understand, tales of sorrow and longing etched into their depths. He carried small gifts from the woods, polished stones marked with strange symbols, feathers blacker than the night sky, and twigs that pulsed with a faint warmth. The town's elders spoke in hushed tones of a curse tied to the creek, an ancient sorrow woven through generations. They said the forest claimed those who trespassed on its secrets, binding their souls to the land. The missing children were the first to be taken, their spirits lingering like shadows trapped between life and death. The counselor, Thomas Raines, had tried to break the curse but only succeeded in becoming a part of it. The family discovered that the forest's hunger was cyclical. Every few decades, it reached out to claim new souls, seeking to replace the lost and sustain its power. The boy was not the first to be drawn into this eternal cycle, and unless they found a way to sever the bond, he would not be the last. Their investigation uncovered a forgotten ritual, buried in the pages of the old journal found beneath the floorboards. It spoke of a choice, one that required a willing sacrifice to free the trapped souls and break the curse. The ritual demanded a connection to the forest's heart, a place where the veil between worlds was thinnest and where the original betrayal had occurred. As the boy's transformation progressed, the house itself became a threshold between worlds. Shadows lengthened and twisted into forms that mirrored the missing children, figures of innocence and pain, lingering just beyond sight. The family felt eyes watching from every corner, whispers brushing past their ears, cold fingers tracing their skin in the dark. Hope flickered in the discovery of the ritual, but with it came a terrible realization: the sacrifice could not be made lightly. To save their son and the souls trapped in Deadwater Creek, one of them would have to become part of the forest, forever bound to the shadows and silence. The boy, now more spirit than flesh, seemed to understand this destiny. His moments of lucidity were brief but filled with clarity. He spoke in riddles and warnings, urging his family to prepare, to be ready for the choice that awaited them. His laughter, once bright and carefree, now held a haunting edge, a reminder of the price that love demanded. The forest waited patiently, ancient and unyielding. It held its breath, knowing the time was near when the cycle would come full circle. The missing kids, the lost counselor, and the boy, they were threads woven into the same dark tapestry. Each bound by sorrow, by silence, and by a longing that transcended death. The family's bond was tested as fear, grief, and love intertwined in a delicate balance. They faced the impossible, to confront a past long buried, to face a darkness born from human failing, and to choose between saving their son or freeing the souls caught in the forest's eternal embrace. Deadwater Creek whispered its secrets in the rustling leaves and the murmurs of the creek's waters. The forest was alive, watching, waiting for the moment when its story would be rewritten. The forest's presence became an inescapable weight pressing on every moment. The boy's transformation continued, each day etching the forest deeper into his flesh and soul. His skin grew textured like the rough bark of ancient trees, mottled with patches of moss and lichen that seemed to pulse faintly with life. His eyes flickered with eerie luminescence, casting green-gold shadows in the dark, reflecting a knowledge far beyond his years. Within the house, the air thickened with a strange energy. The walls seemed to breathe and whisper, shadows dancing just beyond the edge of vision. The photographs from the buried album multiplied, spreading out over surfaces like a silent warning. Each Polaroid captured fleeting moments, children frozen in laughter, but with eyes that betrayed an unspoken sorrow and desperation. When touched, the images seemed to shift subtly, as if the spirits within were stirring, eager to be seen. The boy's voice carried the forest secrets in haunting melodies and soft chants. His words became riddles, fragments of forgotten stories from long ago. The family strained to decipher the meanings, hoping to find a clue that could unravel the curse. But the deeper they delved, the more the forest seemed to tighten its grip, pulling them further into a realm between life and death. Attempts to break the enchantment failed. Salt and sage offered no protection, candles flickered out in unnatural drafts, prayers were swallowed by silence. Visitors grew scarce as whispers spread through town, rumors of a house cursed, of a child turning into something not quite human. Fear isolated the family, leaving them to face the creeping darkness alone. The creek itself changed. Once a gentle trickle, it now gurgled with a cold, sinister voice. Water shimmered unnaturally beneath moonlight, revealing faces beneath the surface, children's faces, pale and pleading, mouths opening to whisper names in the chill night air. The boy often stood at the water's edge, silent, eyes locked on those ghostly reflections, as if communing with unseen companions. In dreams, the family glimpsed the past, the twisted mind of the counselor, Thomas Raines, his madness fueled by the forest's whispering voices. They saw the children's last moments, laughter turning to terror, hope succumbing to despair. They felt the weight of the unspoken guilt that poisoned the land, a curse born from broken trust and lost innocence. The discovery of the ritual was a fragile thread of hope. Buried deep within the town's forgotten history, it promised a way to end the cycle. But it demanded a price. To save the boy and release the trapped souls, a sacrifice was required, a willing heart to become the forest's new guardian, bound forever to the shadows and silence. The family wrestled with this impossible choice. Each loved the boy fiercely, but none could bear the thought of losing him to the forest's eternal embrace. Yet, to refuse meant condemning countless lost children to a fate worse than death, endless wandering, forever yearning for release that would never come. As the boy's humanity faded, his moments of clarity grew more precious and painful. He spoke with a voice that was both his own and something otherworldly. His laughter, once bright, now echoed with a haunting melancholy. He urged his family to prepare, to understand that love sometimes demanded unbearable sacrifice. The house became a liminal space where the veil between worlds thinned. Shadows of the missing children lingered in corners, reaching out with translucent hands, yearning for connection. The boy moved between realms, part child, part spirit, tethered to both the living and the dead. The forest waited, ancient and patient. It held its breath, anticipating the moment when the cycle would complete, when a new guardian would rise, and the curse might be broken or renewed. The family's fate intertwined with the lost souls, bound by sorrow, silence, and a desperate hope for salvation. Time slipped into a dreamlike haze. Days blurred into nights, and the boundary between reality and nightmare dissolved. The boy's final transformation approached, and with it, a choice that would echo through the ages, a choice between love and loss, between freedom and eternal bondage. Deadwater Creek whispered its secrets through the rustling leaves and cold waters. The forest was alive, watching and waiting for its story to unfold, for its shadows to find rest or revenge. The weight of impending fate settled heavily over the family as days stretched into restless nights. The boy's connection to the forest had deepened beyond what anyone could have anticipated. His body bore marks not of illness but of metamorphosis, a subtle, eerie bloom of nature intertwining with flesh. Fine tendrils of ivy crept along his arms and neck, weaving through the pale skin like veins carrying the forest's ancient life force. His eyes, no longer simply childlike, flickered with a haunting depth that seemed to see beyond the veil of the physical world. The house, once a refuge, had become a threshold between two realms, one of the living and one of the lost. The photographs scattered across every surface glimmered faintly in the twilight, their faces shifting and whispering, inviting the living to join their spectral company. The family felt those whispers ripple through their minds like cold currents, relentless and unyielding. Sleep became a scarce commodity, each night filled with visions of the vanished children reaching out, their hands passing through walls, their voices a plaintive chorus in the dark. Outside, the forest held its breath in ominous silence. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their twisted limbs intertwined, creating a canopy that blotted out the sun. The creek, once a babbling stream, now flowed sluggishly, its waters thick and dark as ink, reflecting not the sky but an endless night. The boy was drawn to its banks as if by an unseen force, his gaze often lost in the depths where the water whispered secrets no one else could hear. The ritual discovered within the crumbling pages of the old journal was clear in its demands, a sacrifice not born of coercion but of willing acceptance. It was a choice, to offer oneself as a guardian, a sentinel to the forest's sorrowful spirits, binding their soul to the eternal twilight that cloaked Deadwater Creek. Only through this selfless act could the cycle of loss be broken, freeing the trapped children and lifting the curse that had hung over the land for decades. The family's desperation grew with each passing day. Arguments erupted, tears fell like rain, and yet, beneath the despair, a fierce determination took root. They sought ways to protect the boy, to keep him tethered to the world of the living. But the forest's call was relentless, an ancient melody that no human voice could drown out. As the boy's transformation accelerated, he began to speak in riddles, his voice a soft blend of childlike wonder and something older, more knowing. He described a place deep within the forest, a heart where the original betrayal had stained the earth, where the lost souls waited in restless vigil. It was here the ritual must be performed, a place where the veil between life and death was thinnest. The community's silence was broken only by hushed conversations and furtive glances. Few dared approach the house, and those who did spoke of unnatural coldness, of shadows that lingered too long, of laughter that was both joyous and mournful. The family's isolation deepened, but within that solitude, a quiet strength emerged. The boy's eyes, glowing softly in the night, held a final message, an unspoken plea for mercy, for understanding, and for love strong enough to face the darkest of fates. The decision loomed like a storm on the horizon, each member of the family grappling with the impossible. The forest watched patiently, its ancient heart pulsing in time with the boy's fading humanity. The creek murmured secrets beneath a shroud of mist, carrying voices from the past and promises of redemption. The missing children, their faces both innocent and sorrowful, waited for the moment when the curse would either be broken or bound anew. In the stillness of a twilight suffused with longing and fear, the family prepared for the choice that would define them all, a sacrifice born of love, hope, and the desperate desire to save one boy from becoming forever lost to the shadows of Deadwater Creek. The forest's grasp tightened, the unseen threads of its ancient power weaving through the very air the family breathed. The boy's form had grown more ethereal, his movements becoming fluid, almost like a breeze weaving through leaves. His skin, once smooth and soft, now held a texture that reminded one of tree bark, rough and cracked, yet strangely alive with the pulse of the forest itself. The moss that clung to his limbs shimmered faintly, as if harboring the memories of all the children who had vanished before him. Within the house, time seemed to fracture. Moments slipped away like water through fingers, and the boundary between night and day blurred. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, stretching into corners where nothing should exist. The photographs from the buried album continued to multiply, their images flickering like ghostly candles in the dim light. Each picture was a frozen fragment of a life interrupted, a silent witness to the terror and hope that had collided in this cursed place. The family's hearts weighed heavy with the knowledge that the boy was slipping beyond reach, pulled deeper into the forest's realm with every passing breath. Their desperation manifested in frantic research, old town records, and whispered legends told by the few who dared remember. The name Thomas Raines emerged repeatedly, the camp counselor who had disappeared the same year the first children vanished. His shadow loomed large, a specter of guilt and madness whose presence seemed etched into the very soil. Despite the darkness closing in, the boy retained moments of startling clarity. His voice, when heard, was soft but charged with a strange urgency. He spoke of the children's laughter echoing beneath the canopy, of their longing not for vengeance but for companionship in the endless twilight. He described the forest as a living memory, a vast tapestry woven from innocence lost and promises broken. The family clung to these fragments, seeing in them a path, a way to reach him before he crossed the threshold forever. The creek became a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. Its waters whispered of sorrow and secrets, mirroring the sky in unsettling ways, sometimes bright and calm, other times dark and turbulent as a storm. The faces of the missing children surfaced beneath the surface, eyes full of pleading and quiet understanding. The boy often stood at the edge, drawn inexplicably to these reflections, his fingers grazing the cold water as if reaching for something beyond. Plans for the ritual took shape in hushed conversations. The family learned that to break the curse, a soul had to willingly take the place of the guardian, accepting eternal watch over the lost, binding themselves to the forest sorrow. It was a sacrifice not forced but chosen, an act of love so profound that it could sever the cycle of despair. Yet the knowledge of what this meant pressed heavily on them. To save one was to lose one forever. The boy's transformation accelerated as the moment of decision neared. His eyes glowed softly, a beacon in the encroaching darkness, and his voice carried the cadence of the forest's ancient song. He spoke of peace beyond the pain, of freedom waiting on the other side of sacrifice. His laughter, once light and carefree, now carried a haunting melody that lingered in the silent rooms like a bittersweet farewell. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches whispering secrets in the wind. The creek flowed steadily, carrying with it the memories of those who had vanished, a river of sorrow and hope intertwined. The family's home was a nexus, a place where two worlds brushed together, fragile and fraught with the weight of generations. As the final night approached, the family gathered close, their hearts bound by love and grief. The boy's presence flickered like a fading flame, caught between light and shadow. They spoke in quiet tones, sharing memories and promises, bracing themselves for the sacrifice that would either end the nightmare or bind them all to its eternal embrace. The forest awaited its new guardian, patient and unyielding. The missing children's faces smiled softly in the photographs, their eyes full of understanding and longing. The creek murmured beneath the moonlight, carrying the weight of countless stories waiting to be told. In this moment suspended between despair and hope, the family faced the ultimate choice, one born from love, sacrifice, and the desperate desire to reclaim what was lost. The boy's fate, and the fate of all who had vanished in Deadwater Creek, hung in the balance, poised on the edge of a timeless, haunting promise. The night settled with a heavy stillness, the air thick with anticipation as the boundary between the living world and the haunted forest grew thinner than ever. The boy's form had become almost translucent, like a wisp of smoke caught in a slow dance with the shadows. His eyes, once bright with youthful curiosity, now held an ancient sorrow that belied his age. They shimmered with a quiet acceptance, reflecting the countless souls lost to Deadwater Creek, children whose laughter had been silenced, whose stories had been swallowed by the dark embrace of the forest. The family's house, perched on the edge of the cursed land, had become a place out of time. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, alive with the echoes of the past and the whispered voices of those who waited. The photographs of the missing children, once neatly arranged, now lay scattered like fallen leaves, their edges curling as if touched by unseen hands. Each image was a portal to a lost world, a fragment of innocence caught between life and death. As the night deepened, the forest itself seemed to breathe, a slow, rhythmic pulse felt in the bones rather than heard. The trees swayed without wind, their branches reaching inward as if to cradle the boy in a final, mournful embrace. The creek nearby mirrored the starless sky, its surface disturbed only by the occasional ripple, as if something beneath stirred in restless anticipation. The boy's voice had all but faded, replaced by a silent communion with the spirits who had awaited him for decades. His skin bore the marks of the forest's claim, traces of moss and bark blending with flesh in a surreal tapestry of life and decay. His presence was no longer just human. He was becoming a guardian of the boundary, a living bridge between the worlds. The family, hearts heavy with grief and love, gathered close in the dim light. They understood that the moment of sacrifice was near, that the boy's fate was entwined with the forest's ancient curse. The choice before them was as profound as it was heartbreaking, to allow the boy to become the guardian and free the lost children, or to try to hold him back and risk losing him forever. In the silence, the forest's true nature revealed itself, not as a place of vengeance, but as a realm of longing. The missing children were not restless spirits seeking revenge, they were companions in eternal solitude, waiting for someone to join them and ease their endless loneliness. Their presence was a haunting invitation, a call to the living to cross over and keep them company in the twilight between worlds. The ritual, whispered on the pages of the old journal, was simple in its gravity. The chosen guardian must willingly step into the forest's heart, offering their soul in exchange for peace. This act would sever the curse, allowing the lost children to finally rest and the forest to heal. But it came at the ultimate price. The guardian would remain forever bound to Deadwater Creek, watching over it in eternal solitude. The boy's transformation was nearly complete. His movements had a dreamlike quality, fluid and unearthly. His eyes, now glowing softly like embers in the night, held a final message, a silent plea for understanding and love strong enough to accept the sacrifice. The family's tears mingled with whispered prayers, their hope balanced on the fragile edge of fate. Outside, the forest seemed to pulse with anticipation. The creek murmured a soft lullaby, carrying the voices of the vanished children in a delicate harmony. The trees stood tall and still, their branches weaving a protective canopy over the boy and his family. The boundary between life and death shimmered like a veil ready to be drawn back. In this suspended moment, the family faced the impossible. They had come to understand that love sometimes means letting go, that salvation can come only through sacrifice. The boy was not lost but chosen, destined to become a guardian who would end the cycle of sorrow that had plagued Deadwater Creek for decades. The night held its breath as the final choice approached, the boy's fate intertwined with the forest's ancient heart. The missing children waited with patient, hopeful eyes, ready to welcome the new guardian into their eternal company. The creek whispered promises of peace, and the trees hummed with a quiet reverence. In the stillness of this haunting place, a single truth shone clear: sometimes the darkest paths lead to the brightest hope, and the greatest acts of love are those that transcend even the boundary between life and death. The boy's connection to the forest deepened beyond anything the family could have imagined. His footsteps no longer left prints on the earth. Instead, the ground beneath him seemed to pulse with a faint light, as though the forest itself recognized his presence and responded in kind. His eyes glowed brighter in the darkness, carrying the ancient wisdom of the many children who had come before him, those lost to the shadows but never truly gone. The photographs, once tangible and physical, began to fade from the family's hands. They seemed to dissolve into the air like mist, their images flickering one last time before vanishing altogether. Each lost face smiled faintly, a silent farewell as they crossed from this world into the next, finally freed from their endless waiting. The air was thick with a bittersweet calm, the kind that follows a long, painful storm. The family felt the weight of this transition. The house, once filled with restless energy and ghostly whispers, grew still. A strange serenity settled over the land surrounding Deadwater Creek, as if the very earth was healing from a wound long inflicted. The creek's water ran clearer than it had in years, reflecting the pale light of dawn with renewed clarity. Even the trees seemed to stand taller, their leaves shimmering with a soft green glow, as if touched by the breath of life itself. Though the boy's body had changed, becoming more intertwined with the forest, his spirit remained vibrant, full of the laughter and innocence that once defined him. He was no longer just a child but a guardian, a bridge between the living and the lost. His role was now to watch over the forest and the souls within, to ensure no others would disappear into its depths unremembered. The family, while grieving the loss of the boy in their arms, found solace in the knowledge that his sacrifice had ended decades of pain. They understood that his choice had brought peace not just to the missing children but to the entire town, to the silent sorrow that had haunted its borders. Their hearts, though heavy, swelled with pride and love, emotions that transcended the boundaries of life and death. News of the boy's disappearance and the family's mysterious connection to Deadwater Creek spread quietly through the town. Some whispered of curses and hauntings, others of miracles and salvation. But those closest to the family knew the truth, that love had conquered darkness, and that even in the coldest, darkest places, light could find a way to shine. Over time, the forest became a place of reverence rather than fear. The people of the town honored the missing children with small memorials at the edge of the woods, stones inscribed with names, candles flickering in the night, flowers left as tokens of remembrance. These acts of love kept the memory of the lost alive, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. The creek, once a symbol of sorrow and loss, became a place of quiet reflection. Its waters carried the legacy of those who had vanished, a gentle reminder that even in absence, there is presence, even in silence, a story waiting to be told. Visitors who came to the edge of the forest often reported feeling a comforting warmth, a sense of peace that lingered long after they left. The boy's family moved on, carrying with them the weight of what had happened and the light of what had been saved. They understood that some wounds heal slowly, but that healing is possible when love and sacrifice walk hand in hand. Their lives were forever changed by the haunting beauty of Deadwater Creek, by the children who had vanished and the boy who had chosen to stay. In the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the trees and the creek sang its soft song, they could almost hear the faint laughter of children, joyful, free, at last part of something greater than fear or loss. The forest was no longer a place of darkness but a sanctuary of remembrance, a testament to the enduring power of love and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all. The story of Deadwater Creek would live on, whispered among the trees, carried on the waters, and held in the hearts of those who knew its secrets. It was a tale of disappearance and discovery, of pain and peace, of the thin line between life and death, and the courage it takes to walk it. And as the first light of dawn touched the forest, the boy's glowing eyes faded into the morning mist, his vigil begun, a silent guardian watching over the lost, welcoming the lonely with open arms, and forever guarding the fragile boundary between the worlds. The forest around Deadwater Creek settled into a new rhythm, one that was at once eerie and strangely comforting. The long, restless haunting seemed to have softened, the sharp edges of grief dulled by the boy's sacrifice. His presence, now a permanent part of the woods, brought a different kind of energy, an ancient guardianship that watched quietly over the trees and waters, protecting the boundary between the living and the lost. Those who lived near the forest noticed subtle changes. The oppressive heaviness that once hung over the town lifted, replaced by a calm that felt fragile yet genuine. The wind carried whispers, but these were no longer cries of despair. Instead, they were soft murmurs of gratitude and remembrance. The night no longer felt like a threat but a time for quiet reflection. Families who once feared the stories about Deadwater Creek began to speak of the place with a mix of reverence and sorrow. They gathered at the edge of the forest during certain times, anniversaries of the disappearances, nights when the moon was full, and left tokens of remembrance. Toys, letters, flowers, and photographs found their way to small altars made of stones and branches, acts of love that transcended fear. Among the locals, a legend grew about the boy who had entered the forest and become its guardian. Some said he was an angel, others a spirit, and a few whispered that he had been chosen by the lost children themselves. His story spread quietly, carried by word of mouth, a reminder of sacrifice and hope in a place once marked only by darkness. Visitors drawn by curiosity or the desire to pay respects found themselves touched by the forest's new energy. Many reported moments of profound peace, a sense of being watched over gently, as if the trees themselves held memories of love and loss. The creek, which had been murky and still, now ran clear and bright, its waters reflecting the stars in a way that seemed almost magical. Yet beneath the surface of this newfound calm, a subtle tension remained. The forest, though no longer hostile, was still a place where the veil between worlds was thin. The guardian boy's watch was eternal, his role unending. He had traded a fleeting human life for a timeless vigilance, forever intertwined with the fate of those lost to Deadwater Creek. The townspeople respected this boundary, understanding that the forest was both a resting place and a reminder. The missing children were no longer forgotten shadows but enduring presences whose stories continued through the hearts of those who remembered. Their laughter, faint and distant, was carried on the breeze, a haunting melody of innocence preserved beyond time. The boy's family, though marked by loss, found a new purpose in sharing the truth of what had happened. They spoke cautiously, mindful of the pain it might bring, but determined to honor the boy's sacrifice and the children's memory. Their voices became a bridge between past and present, ensuring that the story of Deadwater Creek remained alive and true. In quiet moments, when the wind rustled softly through the leaves and the creek sang its gentle song, the boy's glowing eyes could still be seen, brief flickers of light within the forest's depths. They were a silent promise, a guardian's vow to watch over the lost and the living alike. The forest had become a place of duality, both a sanctuary and a warning. It held the memories of those who had vanished, the sorrow of a town once gripped by fear, and the enduring hope born from sacrifice. It was a testament to the power of love to transcend even the darkest of shadows, a reminder that some bonds are never broken. As seasons passed and the years slipped by, the legend of Deadwater Creek remained etched in the collective consciousness. The forest whispered its secrets only to those who would listen, its stories woven into the very fabric of the land. The missing children's faces faded from the photographs, but their spirits remained vibrant, carried forever by the guardian boy who had chosen to stay. In this haunting, beautiful place where time seemed to fold back on itself, the boundary between worlds was not a barrier but a bridge. The boy's sacrifice had transformed the forest, turning it from a place of loss into a beacon of remembrance and love. And in the quiet night, beneath the watchful eyes of the stars, the story of Deadwater Creek continued, an eternal echo of innocence lost and hope regained. The forest around Deadwater Creek seemed to breathe with a life all its own, a pulse that resonated with the memories of those who had vanished. Time in the town slowed, as if the world itself acknowledged the delicate balance between loss and healing that now defined the place. The boy who had become the guardian watched silently, his presence woven into the very fabric of the trees and shadows. Locals often spoke in hushed tones about the changes they sensed in the air. The chill that once clung to the night air had softened, replaced by a quiet warmth that felt like an embrace rather than a warning. Even the animals of the forest appeared more at ease, deer moved with graceful confidence, birds sang gentle melodies, and the creek's water sparkled under the moonlight like liquid silver. The town's children, who once dared not wander near the woods, began to play at its edges once more, their laughter blending with the natural symphony of rustling leaves and flowing water. Parents watched cautiously but with a new kind of hope, sensing that the forest no longer held the same malevolent grip it once did. Yet, beneath this surface peace, the weight of history remained, a silent guardian reminding all who lived nearby that some wounds never fully heal. The family who had lived through the boy's transformation became stewards of the story, caretakers of a fragile truth that walked the line between reality and the supernatural. They shared memories carefully, emphasizing the power of love, sacrifice, and remembrance over fear. Their words helped the community reconcile with the past, turning decades of pain into a narrative of hope and renewal. Memorials along the forest's edge grew steadily. Small gatherings were held where townsfolk would light candles, share stories, and place tokens to honor the missing children. Each offering was a testament to remembrance, a tangible symbol that those lost were not forgotten but carried forever in the hearts of the living. The air around these memorials felt charged with emotion, a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. The boy's presence in the forest became a whispered legend, a story told to children on calm nights to remind them of courage and kindness. It was said that his glowing eyes could sometimes be seen among the branches, a watchful light in the darkness. For some, this sight was comforting; for others, a solemn reminder of the thin veil separating the worlds. The creek itself, once a symbol of despair, now served as a place of reflection. Its clear waters invited visitors to pause and contemplate the intertwining of life and loss. The sound of flowing water soothed restless hearts, a quiet promise that even in darkness, movement toward light continues. Many found solace here, drawn by the intangible peace that had settled over Deadwater Creek. Despite the healing, the forest kept its secrets. At times, strange sounds echoed through the trees, soft laughter, fleeting whispers, or the distant echo of children's footsteps. These moments were fleeting but powerful reminders that the past lingered just beyond the veil. The guardian boy's watch was eternal; his sacrifice ensured that the forest remained a place where memories lived on, protected from being lost to time. Visitors who came seeking answers or closure often left with a renewed sense of connection, to the land, to the lost children, and to the boy who stood as their sentinel. The stories they carried home spread quietly beyond the town, weaving into the larger tapestry of human experience where grief and hope coexist. Deadwater Creek became a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of the enduring power of love to transform even the darkest places. The balance between light and shadow at Deadwater Creek was fragile, but it held. The forest, once a realm of fear and disappearance, had become a place where the living and the lost coexisted in a delicate harmony. The boy who chose to remain had become more than a memory; he was a guardian spirit, a beacon of hope shining through the trees. As the years passed, the tale of Deadwater Creek was retold in many forms, through whispered conversations, written words, and quiet acts of remembrance. It became a part of the town's identity, a reminder that while darkness can take much, it cannot extinguish the light born of sacrifice and love. The children who vanished remained present, not as shadows, but as eternal parts of the forest's heart. In the stillness of night, when the stars shimmered above and the creek flowed gently, the boy's glowing eyes could be glimpsed once more, a silent guardian watching over the sacred boundary between worlds. His vigil continued, a promise that no child would ever be forgotten, and no sorrow would remain unhealed for long. The forest of Deadwater Creek stood as a testament to this truth, a place where stories lived on, where love and loss intertwined, and where the past was neither erased nor trapped but honored and remembered, forever. The years following the boy's transformation into the guardian of Deadwater Creek brought a quiet reverence to the once feared forest. The community around it evolved, shaped by the echoes of the past and the subtle presence that now lingered among the trees. The legend of the missing children, the unsolved disappearances, and the boy who gave himself to the woods had become inseparable from the town's identity. The air seemed lighter, but an undercurrent of mystery remained, a reminder that some stories resist closure. The missing children's faces faded from newspaper clippings and cold case files, yet their spirits remained vivid, carried in the whispers of the wind and the soft rustle of leaves. The boy, now a permanent part of this spectral landscape, stood sentinel, not as a guardian against evil, but as a protector of memory and connection. Locals began to sense that Deadwater Creek was more than a place; it was a living archive of grief and love, an intersection between the natural and the supernatural. The forest did not seek to harm but to remember, to keep the stories alive in ways the world beyond its borders could not understand. The trees themselves seemed to lean in closer, their branches like arms embracing those who came with open hearts. Families who once avoided the area began to visit with purpose. They walked the winding trails, placing flowers and small mementos where the children had last been seen. These acts were silent prayers, threads of hope woven into the fabric of the forest. The boy's family, once shattered by loss, became ambassadors of healing, sharing the story of sacrifice as a beacon for others caught in their own shadows of grief. The boy's presence was felt in subtle, profound ways. On fog-draped mornings, a faint glow might catch the corner of one's eye, a soft, steady light weaving through the underbrush. Travelers would speak of a comforting warmth during cold nights, a feeling of being watched over without fear. His sacrifice had transcended tragedy, transforming into a source of strength that rippled quietly through the community. Yet, the forest held its secrets close. Not every story was one of peace. Occasionally, whispers of old pain surfaced, an echo in the night, a shadow flickering at the edge of vision. These moments reminded those who listened that the line between memory and haunting was thin. The boy's vigil was a balancing act, holding darkness at bay without erasing its existence. The original killer, the camp counselor whose guilt had stained the woods for decades, remained an unresolved thread in the tapestry. No one had found justice, no one had answered for the disappearances. The forest's guardianship was not a substitute for closure, it was a reminder that some wounds linger beneath the surface, waiting for time, truth, or courage to unearth them. Occasionally, newcomers arrived, drawn by the stories, the mystery, or the desire to understand the forest's strange energy. They came with cameras, notebooks, and cautious hearts, hoping to capture something unseen. Some left with stories of eerie beauty and haunting peace, others spoke of fleeting figures or whispered voices. The forest seemed to communicate on its own terms, revealing itself only to those who approached with respect. The boy's family maintained a delicate balance between protecting the sacredness of the place and allowing the story to be told. They understood the importance of remembrance but also the need to guard against exploitation. The story of Deadwater Creek was a living thing, fragile, complex, and deeply human. It was not merely a tale of horror but a narrative of connection, sacrifice, and the enduring presence of love beyond death. Memorial ceremonies became annual events, drawing people from far beyond the town's borders. Each gathering was a collective act of remembrance and healing, a time when the community came together to honor the missing children and the boy who became their guardian. Candles flickered in the dusk, prayers were whispered, and stories were shared, threads weaving the past and present into a tapestry of resilience. The creek, once dark and foreboding, now shimmered with a quiet beauty. Its waters carried the reflections of stars, moonlight, and the countless memories it held. To those who understood, the creek was a mirror, showing both the pain of loss and the light of remembrance. It flowed endlessly, a symbol of time's passage and the persistence of memory. In the stillness of the forest, when night fell and the world hushed, the boy's glowing eyes could still be glimpsed, a silent vow etched into the landscape. His presence was a promise that no child would be forgotten, no story left untold. He was the forest's heart, its guardian, and its most poignant memory. The legend of Deadwater Creek, shaped by sorrow and sacrifice, continued to grow, not as a tale of fear, but as a testament to the power of remembrance. The boy's sacrifice had given the missing children a voice, a presence, and a guardian who watched eternally. The forest was no longer a place to fear but a place to remember, to honor, and to find peace. And so, the story lived on, whispered through the rustling leaves and the flowing waters, a haunting melody of love, loss, and hope that echoed endlessly through the woods of Deadwater Creek. The seasons changed, carrying the story of Deadwater Creek through cycles of renewal and quiet reflection. Each passing year deepened the roots of the forest's legend, embedding the missing children's memory more firmly in the hearts of those who lived nearby. The community's relationship with the woods had transformed from one of fear to one of reverence, shaped by the enduring presence of the boy who became their guardian. The forest's edge became a place of pilgrimage for those seeking connection, parents grieving losses, seekers of peace, and those drawn by the inexplicable pull of a place where the veil between worlds was thinnest. They came to leave tokens of remembrance, worn toys, photographs, letters folded with trembling hands. Each offering was a silent prayer, a way to keep the children's stories alive in a world that often preferred forgetting. The boy's family continued their quiet vigil, balancing grief with hope. Their home, once marked by sorrow, now held a subtle glow, an energy born from the knowledge that their son's sacrifice had forged a bridge between the living and the lost. They shared the story carefully, emphasizing the power of memory and love to overcome even the darkest chapters of history. Their words became a source of comfort for many, weaving a narrative of healing into the fabric of the town. Despite the peace that had settled, the forest was never entirely still. Sometimes, strange sounds stirred the quiet, soft laughter carried on the breeze, footsteps that faded into silence, and the occasional glimpse of glowing eyes watching from the shadows. These fleeting moments were reminders that the forest was alive with memory, a place where the past and present coexisted in delicate balance. Local historians and investigators occasionally revisited the cold case files, drawn back by the unresolved nature of the disappearances. They pored over old evidence, hoping to unearth new clues, yet the truth remained elusive. The original killer's identity was never confirmed, a haunting reminder that some shadows refused to be chased away. The forest's guardian did not seek justice through human means. His role was to protect the memory, to ensure the children were never forgotten. The community's efforts to honor the missing evolved into traditions that transcended generations. Schools incorporated the story into lessons about empathy, loss, and resilience. Artists captured the haunting beauty of the forest in paintings, music, and poetry, each work a tribute to the unseen lives that shaped the town's soul. The story became a living part of the culture, a reminder that memory is a powerful force against oblivion. Visitors came from afar, drawn by the story's depth and the mysterious energy that lingered in the air. Some sought answers, others, solace. All left changed, touched by the delicate interplay of loss and hope that defined Deadwater Creek. The boys' glowing eyes were said to appear to those who approached with open hearts, a quiet reassurance that they were not alone in their grief. The creek itself, once a symbol of darkness and despair, had become a place of quiet reflection. Its waters flowed clear and steady, reflecting the sky and the silhouettes of ancient trees. The sound of the creek was a lullaby for the restless, a reminder that life continues, even in the wake of sorrow. To many, the creek was a sacred space, a mirror reflecting the resilience of the human spirit. Memorial ceremonies grew in significance, becoming moments of collective healing. Each year, townsfolk gathered to light candles, share stories, and honor the children who never returned. The boys' family led these ceremonies, their presence a testament to the enduring bond between the living and the lost. The gatherings were both solemn and hopeful, a recognition that memory is a living thing, fragile, powerful, and eternal. The forest's boundaries blurred with the town, the line between past and present softening. Nature and memory intertwined, creating a space where the missing children's spirits were free to roam, no longer trapped by fear or sorrow. The boy's role as guardian was more than a sacrifice, it was a gift, a beacon that transformed grief into strength, darkness into light. Yet the mystery endured. The boy's glowing eyes, a symbol of his eternal watch, continued to appear unpredictably, sometimes in the corner of a window, other times reflected in the creek's shimmering surface. These glimpses sparked wonder and reflection, a reminder that some stories live beyond the limits of time and space. The forest remained a place of paradox, both a sanctuary and a reminder of loss. It held the weight of decades of pain but also the promise of healing. The boy's sacrifice had changed everything, weaving a new narrative into the fabric of the town. It was a story not just of disappearance and fear, but of connection, love, and the power to remember. In the stillness of the night, when the stars blanketed the sky and the creek whispered softly, the boy's presence was felt strongest. His glowing eyes, a beacon of hope and remembrance, watched over the forest and those who came to honor it. The legend of Deadwater Creek was no longer just a tale of missing children, it was a testament to the resilience of memory and the enduring power of love that outlasts even death. The forest around Deadwater Creek held a stillness that many described as sacred, a silence woven from the whispers of those who had vanished and the steady presence of the boy who remained as their guardian. Over the years, this quiet place became a symbol of something deeper than tragedy, an emblem of memory and the invisible threads that connect the living with those lost to time. Visitors who came seeking answers or comfort often spoke of an ineffable feeling, a gentle but persistent sensation of being watched over, not with menace but with a quiet, protective care. The boy's glowing eyes were more than just legend, they became a beacon for the grieving, a reminder that no soul was truly alone. It was as if the forest itself had absorbed the sorrow and transmuted it into a shield, sheltering those who came with open hearts. Local families shared stories around dinner tables and in classrooms, recounting the boy's sacrifice as an act of profound love. His choice to remain in the forest was seen not as a loss but as a gift, a promise that the missing children had found a guardian who understood their pain and shared their loneliness. The narrative grew beyond a cold case or a haunting into a story about the power of compassion to transcend the boundaries of life and death. Artists found inspiration in the story, capturing the haunting beauty of the woods and the bittersweet glow that lingered in the shadows. Paintings depicted the boy standing amid ancient trees, his eyes luminous against the night, surrounded by faint silhouettes of children's laughter and memories. Musicians composed melodies that echoed the gentle sorrow and hope embedded in the legend, melodies that moved listeners to tears and reflection. The community's efforts to honor the missing children took on new life, becoming a movement of remembrance that reached far beyond the forest. Schools organized memorial art projects and writing contests, encouraging young people to explore themes of loss, memory, and healing. Public spaces displayed installations, small sculptures of children's toys, delicate lights floating among branches, each a quiet testament to lives once full of promise. The boy's family remained central to this ongoing remembrance, their grief transformed into a quiet strength that inspired others. They spoke openly about the journey from despair to acceptance, their words carrying a message of hope amid heartbreak. Their home became a place where visitors could find solace, learn the true story, and understand the deeper meaning behind the sacrifice. Even as the years passed, the forest kept some of its mysteries. Occasionally, a visitor reported hearing children's voices carried on the wind, soft giggles or whispered names that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Others caught fleeting glimpses of movement just beyond sight, shadows that vanished when looked at directly. These moments were not frightening but tender reminders that the children's spirits lingered, forever part of the place that had become their eternal home. The creek's water, once dark and ominous, now flowed with a clear, steady current, reflecting the sky and the canopy above. It was a mirror to the past and a symbol of continuity, a reminder that life flows onward, carrying memory with it like leaves drifting downstream. Many who visited found comfort in its gentle sounds, the splash of water over stones, the rustle of reeds, sounds that seemed to speak a language older than words. Annual gatherings grew in size and significance, drawing people from distant places who came to honor the missing and to celebrate the boy who gave himself to the forest. These ceremonies were moments of collective remembrance and healing, where grief was transformed into a shared act of love. Candles flickered against the night sky, and stories were told, weaving together the past and present into a tapestry of resilience. Despite the peace that had settled, the forest never forgot its origins. The unanswered questions about the original killer hung like a shadow beneath the surface, a reminder that some truths remain elusive. The boy's role was never to bring justice in the human sense but to keep the children's memories alive, to ensure their stories were not swallowed by silence. The legend of Deadwater Creek became more than a story, it was a living legacy. It challenged those who heard it to consider the depths of loss and the ways in which love endures beyond absence. It showed that even in the darkest places, connection and remembrance could light a path forward. At night, when the wind moved softly through the branches and the stars cast their pale glow, the boy's eyes could still be seen, watching, guarding, a silent promise etched into the very heart of the forest. His sacrifice had given the missing children a voice, a home, and a protector. And in that enduring presence, the town found a kind of peace, fragile but real, born from the intertwining of grief and hope. Deadwater Creek was no longer just a place of disappearance and fear. It was a testament to the power of memory, the resilience of community, and the mysterious bonds that tie us all, living and lost, together in the endless dance of time. The story of Deadwater Creek had settled deep into the fabric of the town, becoming a quiet undercurrent beneath daily life. It was a story told in whispers, remembered in moments of silence, and honored in the gentle traditions that grew around the forest's edge. The missing children, once lost to fear and uncertainty, had become a presence, felt more than seen, understood more than explained. The boy's sacrifice continued to resonate, a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of love are born in the most unimaginable circumstances. His choice to remain bound to the forest was a gift beyond measure, an eternal vigil that bridged the gap between the living and the vanished. The glowing eyes that appeared in the darkness were not symbols of menace but of protection, a light that never faded, even as the years passed. Communities around the region began to look toward Deadwater Creek not as a place to fear, but as a symbol of remembrance and resilience. Other towns facing similar losses reached out, inspired by the story of a boy who chose to stand guard over those who never returned. The narrative spread, carried by word of mouth, by art, by quiet ceremonies held beneath the stars. It was a story that gave people hope, that even in the face of devastating loss, love endures. Despite this growth, the forest held on to its secrets. The mystery of the original killer remained unsolved, a shadow that lingered beneath the surface of every remembrance. Some nights, those familiar with the story would speak of the feeling that the forest itself was alive, that it remembered the pain and sorrow of the past. The boy's presence was not just a comfort but a guardian against the darkness that had once claimed so many. Visitors continued to come, some out of curiosity, others seeking closure or peace. Many reported sensations that defied explanation, the softest touch of a breeze when no wind blew, a faint echo of laughter carried on the air, the fleeting impression of small hands brushing past. These experiences were reminders that the children's spirits were not gone but present, quiet companions in the shadows. The creek's waters, once dark and foreboding, had become a place of reflection and healing. Its steady flow was a metaphor for life's persistence, a reminder that time moves forward even as memory holds the past close. Some found themselves drawn to the water's edge, where the light played on the surface and the sounds of the forest wrapped around them like a protective embrace. Annual memorials became sacred rituals, drawing families, friends, and strangers alike to gather beneath the canopy. These gatherings were marked by silence and song, by the lighting of candles and the sharing of stories. Each ceremony reaffirmed the community's commitment to never forget, to hold the missing children in their hearts as living parts of the town's soul. The boy's family remained a quiet presence in these ceremonies, their grief transformed into a quiet strength that inspired all who knew their story. Their willingness to share the truth, to speak of sacrifice and love, offered a path for others struggling with loss. They became a symbol of hope, showing that even the deepest wounds could find a measure of peace. Over time, the story of Deadwater Creek evolved beyond tragedy, becoming a powerful testament to the bonds that connect us across time and space. It challenged those who heard it to consider the ways in which memory and love can overcome even the darkest shadows. The boys' vigil was not just about guarding the lost, it was about reminding the living that those who vanish remain part of the world, woven into its very fabric. The forest stood as a living monument, a place where past and present converged, where loss and hope coexisted in fragile balance. The boys' glowing eyes, the faint laughter, the shifting shadows, all were threads in a tapestry that told of resilience, compassion, and the unbreakable power of memory. As the seasons turned and the years passed, the legend of Deadwater Creek continued to inspire, comfort, and haunt. It was a story that defied easy answers, that embraced complexity and ambiguity. It was a story of children lost and found, of a boy's sacrifice that echoed through time, and of a community's enduring commitment to remember. In the quiet moments, when the world seemed still and the stars shone bright, the boy's presence was felt strongest. His watchful eyes, glowing softly in the darkness, were a promise that no one would ever be truly forgotten, and that love, even in its quietest forms, could light the way through the darkest nights. The enduring presence of the boy in the forest transformed Deadwater Creek from a place marked by loss into a sanctuary of remembrance and quiet hope. The town, once shadowed by unspeakable tragedy, began to heal in small but meaningful ways, with the boy's vigil providing a steady light in the darkness. His eyes, glowing softly beneath the canopy, became a symbol of a love that refuses to fade, an unspoken promise that the missing children's stories would live on. This promise resonated far beyond the boundaries of the forest, touching the lives of people who struggled with their own grief and unanswered questions. The boy's sacrifice reminded them that even when justice remains out of reach, and answers remain elusive, there is still power in remembrance and connection. It was this power that began to reshape the way the community viewed the past, not as a wound to be hidden, but as a part of their shared identity to be honored. With each passing year, more families found solace in visiting the creek. They came to light candles, to leave mementos, or simply to sit quietly by the flowing water and listen to the whispers of the forest. Many returned with a sense of peace, feeling as though the boy and the children were with them, sharing their grief and easing their burdens. These visits became acts of healing, small rituals that helped the living carry the weight of loss. The local schools embraced the story as a teaching tool about compassion, resilience, and the importance of community. Students created artwork and wrote essays inspired by the boy's sacrifice and the enduring presence of the missing children. These projects fostered empathy and understanding, encouraging a new generation to remember and honor those who had vanished, not with fear but with love. Local artists, too, found inspiration in the legend, creating works that captured the haunting beauty and bittersweet hope of Deadwater Creek. Paintings depicted the boy standing guard beneath ancient trees, surrounded by the faint outlines of children's laughter and memories. Musicians composed melodies that echoed the forest's quiet song, a melody that wove together sorrow and solace in a haunting harmony. The boy's family, though forever changed by their loss, became pillars of the community's efforts to remember and heal. They spoke openly about the journey from despair to acceptance, sharing their story to help others find their own way through grief. Their home, once a place marked by tragedy, became a beacon of hope and resilience, welcoming visitors who sought comfort and understanding. The creek itself transformed from a symbol of fear into a place of reflection and renewal. Its waters, once dark and foreboding, now shimmered under the sun and moonlight, carrying the stories of the past downstream into the future. The gentle sound of flowing water became a balm for aching hearts, a reminder that life, despite its sorrows, moves forward. Annual gatherings grew in significance, drawing larger crowds who came to honor the missing children and the boy who watched over them. These ceremonies, held beneath the towering trees, were moments of collective remembrance and healing. Candles flickered against the night sky, stories were shared, and a community united in its commitment to never forget. Each gathering reaffirmed the power of love and memory to transcend even the darkest shadows. Yet, despite the peace that had settled, the forest retained an air of mystery. The unanswered questions about the original killer, the camp counselor whose crimes had shattered so many lives, lingered like a ghost. Some believed the forest itself held the truth, whispered only to those who listened closely enough. The boy's role was never to deliver justice in the human sense but to keep the children's memories alive, ensuring they would never be swallowed by silence. Visitors sometimes reported strange experiences, faint voices on the wind, shadows moving just beyond sight, the sensation of gentle hands brushing past. These moments were not frightening but deeply comforting, reminders that the children's spirits lingered, woven into the very fabric of the forest. They were not alone. The boy's eternal vigil was a shield against the darkness, a testament to the enduring power of love. As seasons changed and years turned into decades, the legend of Deadwater Creek became a living story, one that challenged listeners to embrace the complexities of grief and memory. It taught that loss, while profound, need not be the end of connection. Instead, it showed that love could transform absence into presence, and that the bonds between souls could stretch beyond time. In the quiet hours of the night, when the wind whispered through the leaves and the stars cast a pale light over the forest, the boy's glowing eyes still watched, steady, compassionate, unwavering. His sacrifice had given the missing children a home, a voice, and a protector. And through his watchful gaze, the town found a fragile but enduring peace, a light to guide them through their darkest nights. Deadwater Creek had transformed from a place marked by chilling loss into a symbol of enduring memory and unexpected comfort. The boy who had chosen to remain, tethered to the forest by sacrifice and love, had become the silent guardian of a secret no longer whispered in fear but spoken of with reverence. His presence, felt more than seen, was a beacon, a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, connection persists. This transformation did not erase the shadows entirely. The forest still held its mysteries, its silent history waiting in the rustling leaves and the winding paths. The original horror, the crimes committed by the elusive camp counselor, remained an unhealed wound beneath the surface. The killer's identity was still unknown to the world, a ghost that haunted not just the forest but the collective memory of those who lived nearby. Yet, the boy's vigil altered the nature of that haunting. The children's ghosts no longer appeared as lost or vengeful spirits. Instead, they sought companionship, their presence a quiet invitation to those willing to listen and remember. The eerie laughter that once sent chills down the spine was now understood as a form of connection, a bridge between worlds that softened the edge of loss. The forest's influence reached beyond the local community. Families affected by disappearances in other areas found a strange solace in the story of Deadwater Creek. It became a quiet legend shared among those who grieved, a narrative that honored their pain while offering a glimmer of hope. The boy's sacrifice was a testament to the enduring power of love, a force strong enough to transcend death and darkness. Researchers and paranormal investigators occasionally visited the site, drawn by reports of inexplicable phenomena. Many left without answers, but some spoke of an overwhelming sense of peace rather than fear. The boy's presence was described as calming, a guardian spirit who offered protection rather than menace. These accounts spread quietly, reinforcing the forest's new identity as a place of healing rather than horror. The community embraced this shift. The annual memorials became celebrations of life and memory, drawing people from surrounding towns and beyond. Songs and stories filled the air, each one a thread weaving together the past and present. The forest was no longer a place to avoid but a sanctuary where sorrow and hope coexisted. Children grew up hearing the story, not as a warning, but as a reminder of the importance of kindness and courage. The boy's choice to stay, to watch over his lost friends, inspired many to see beyond fear and into the heart of compassion. It was a legacy that taught resilience, the understanding that even in the darkest places, light could be found. The creek itself seemed to reflect this change. Its waters, once dark and still, now sparkled with a gentle vitality. The trees, heavy with history, stood tall as silent witnesses to the passage of time and the endurance of memory. The wind carried the faintest echoes of laughter and whispers, reminders that those lost were never truly gone. Yet, beneath this peaceful surface, the forest remained a place of delicate balance. The spirits were content but not forgotten. Their presence was a reminder of the unfinished stories, the lives interrupted, and the mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. The boy's watchful eyes kept the darkness at bay, but they also invited reflection, a call to remember that every loss carries a story, and every story deserves to be heard. For the families of the missing children, the forest offered something rare, a form of closure without forgetting. The boy's eternal vigil was a promise that their loved ones were not alone, that they were part of something larger than tragedy. It was a reminder that memory, love, and sacrifice create bonds that even time cannot sever. The story of Deadwater Creek had become a legend not because of fear, but because of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of connection. It challenged those who heard it to hold on to their loved ones a little tighter, to cherish every moment, and to believe that even in loss, love remains. As night fell over the forest and the stars shone down, the boy's eyes glowed softly, watching over the trees, the creek, and the memories intertwined with them. His vigil was eternal, a light in the darkness for all who sought comfort and understanding. In his silent watch, the missing children found peace, the town found healing, and the forest found a new story, one of love, remembrance, and the unbreakable ties that bind us all. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey through the haunting mystery of Deadwater Creek. If you found yourself drawn into this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new tale from Mr. Darksnights. Remember, sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones that remind us of the power of love, memory, and hope, even in the darkest places. stay safe, stay curious, and until next time, keep your lights on and your heart open. This is Mr. Dark's Nights, signing off. Good night, and sweet dreams.